Good morning, or good afternoon, maybe good evening, depends on when you're watching this. Why don't we just go with what we like to say here at Shady Acres? Hello! Today I'm going to try something that happens to be a favorite of mine, turning a piece of wood as natural as I can get it. I'll let you take a look at that piece of wood. It's a piece of cherry. I don't really know where it came from. I don't know if this was the root ball. Kind of looks like it to me. It's got all kinds of branches coming out of it. I'm a little worried about this part right here, these two branches, because underneath this there's a crack right along here, and I don't know if those two little branches are going to stick with us through this turning or if they're going to come off somewhere along the way, but we're going to find out. So I'm going to start with drilling a partial hole with a Forstner bit about 3.5 inch diameter to accommodate my chuck diameter, and then I will install a woodworm screw, and we'll just come right in here with the woodworm screw to hold it, and we'll get it mounted up on the lathe, bring up the tailstock, and see what we can make out of this. Stick around. So now I've drilled a shallow hole to provide clearance for the chuck, and now I'm going to drill that center hole out to allow for my woodworm screw to screw in there, and we'll get this thing mounted up. I was able to get it mounted up. It's quite secure. It may not look like it, but it is. See if I can bring you in here any closer. You can see that the lip of the chuck jaws are mounted firmly against the flat area. Here it looks like they're not, but right in this area, right up in here, they are mounted flat. We've got a little gap here, but that won't hurt anything. They're flat in there. They're flat all the way around as much as possible. I actually was able to get it pretty well balanced. It's not perfect, but it's close. A little heavier on this end, but not bad. And it spins pretty good. Let's see how fast we can get it to go without shaking all over the place. That's probably about where we'll start, about 526 RPM. So I'm going to sharpen up my gouge and get cracking. Hang on. So here's my setup. I will bring up the tailstock just so nobody has a heart attack. The way I like to do this is lock down the tailstock and advance the ram while the turning is in motion. That helps me find a perfect center. We'll just apply a little pressure here. Lock the ram in place. Now I like to turn with a 5/8 inch bowl gouge, freshly sharpened. This is a 60-degree angle. I found this works really well for me. Not sure what works for you. So let's get to rocking and rolling and see what happens. Ooh, hard wood. Yeah, this is wiggling a little bit. It's a little trick I showed in a different, I don't know if I showed this in a video or just in a picture, in a posting I did. But if you have a live center like this and you take a standard pencil and just lay it on there, that's going to give you a 2-inch circle, which is just about right for standard 50mm jaws. My jaws are dovetail jaws, so I need to cut back inside the outside diameter a little bit. Pretty close. I'll remove the tailstock here in a minute and we'll flatten this out. I want to work on the outside here a little more. I want to have a decent size rim for the bottom here, but I can't, not much point in going outside of there, so we'll shoot for this to be the rim of the bottom for it to sit on. I did a couple of things there. I added some CA glue to this crack in an effort to try and save this. I'm not sure it's going to work. I kind of think it's not going to work, but it is somewhat more stable than it was. Doesn't seem to wiggle anymore. That's good. It may be that when I flip this over, I might take this to the bandsaw and cut off these branches to where they're a little bit shorter. I don't really need them there anyway. I'm not sure I can even reach out that far when I start hollowing it out. This larger branch would probably be enough. So we'll just see how that goes. And I also went and sharpened my chisel because I'm telling you, this cherry is hard wood. And we're getting there. I think I'm going to have to resort to a scraper. This is my only negative rake scraper. I think it's, what, 1.5 inches? Looks like it could use a fresh edge. Hold on just a second. Alright, here we go. I'm got a high spot right here. All right, I think we're about there. I am going to have to resort to my secret weapon. But that's not unusual for a piece like this. I don't know if it's showing up on camera, but there's a pretty good definition of a rim right here for the base. And that easily clears the hollow I created in the middle. Yeah, got a good 1/8 of an inch there. And my idea was to sweep this up a little bit, up towards the top, and I've done that. Let's see if this is still wiggle free. You know what? It really is. It's not wiggling. Well, not because it's all that thick. But I might be able to save that. I hope so. Haven't quite got my rim here as smooth as I'd like it. Let me work on that just a little bit more. Well, I'm going to try a square scraper on my base rim here. That's better, just a little bit more. I'm going to go back to the round scraper on the outside here and try and define that just a little bit better. I just hate keep cutting into this split. That looks good. Time for my secret weapon. The secret weapon. You ever seen one of these? These are called Sandoflex, made by Merit Industries. They consist of, I think this is a 4-inch, 3.5-inch housing. Has horsehair brushes in it. And those back up sandpaper. In this case, these are slashed pieces of sandpaper. They conform to, they'll separate as they're in use like this, and they conform to variations in the wood. And this is non-slashed. This is used for flatter areas. Same situation. And these are refills. You get sandpaper refills that fit inside of this. And to feed that refill out, you unscrew this a little bit, pull up, back it up, pull it out of here, trim off the old, and then you've got fresh. They work really slick. And what you do is you just chuck these up in a drill. And we'll take it to the lathe and I'll show you how that works. Now while you weren't looking, I did take a second to clean up the bottom of this so it's ready to go in the chuck when the sanding is done. I'll sand this as smooth as I can get it and put some finish on it. Then we'll turn it around and hollow it out. So let me get my mask on and I'll show you how this works. I do like to do this in reverse, especially for something like this, because if I'm sanding in this direction and the drill's turning here, all it's going to do is force those down, and I want to take them off of there. I want a nice clean crack. If I'm going to have a crack, I want it to be a clean crack. So I will reverse the lathe. We'll sand over in this area. So the lathe direction is this way, the drill direction is this way, and it'll clean that right up. Let me get my mask on and we'll get to work. Okay, here we go. I'm going to turn it about 300 RPM. So far all I've done is just outside of my rim. I've just done this area. It's not necessarily done yet. I want to stop and check my progress. When I do the rim, I want to use kind of a light touch because I do want this to be pronounced around here. I want you to be able to see that it's actually a rim. So light touch. See, it's cleaning that up pretty good. I might have to take a pick and pick some of those small pieces out of the crack. Like I say, if I'm going to have a crack, I want to know it's a crack. So I like it nice and clean. But it has already smoothed it out. It actually feels very smooth for 60 grit. It's amazing. This thing is just truly amazing. Looking pretty good. Now I'm going to sand forward, so I'll move to this side. It's coming down at me, so I'm over here coming up. That looks pretty good. I'm going to switch to 120 grit slashed and work on this, and then I'll switch to 180 and work on it. I won't bore you with all of that. I'll come back when it's done and when it's ready for the finish. Sanding's done. This is Zinsser Bullseye Seal Coat. So I put a coat of wax on, gave it about 10 minutes to dry, and I'm just buffing it out here. What I need to do is put a little divot in here. I had to smooth this out because it was kind of jagged and raised up. I don't want anything to interfere in the chuck when I turn this around. So I smoothed that out, and in doing that I took off my little indent from the tailstock, so I need to take care of that. So I'm just going to use a 1/2 inch Ellsworth grind chisel just to put a little divot in there. That'll give me a starting point with my live center. There we go. All right, we'll get this turned around and move along. The tenon on this is, I think it's about 2 1/8. Ideally, it should be about 2 inches. Well, I thought I was ready to go. I think we're finally ready to start. So I've got my mask on now, face shield, got good clearance of the tool rest. I'm just going to take this slow and easy, turning it at about 575 RPM. Thought I'd try and give you a little different angle on the turning. Well, I think I'm going to have to move the tailstock out. Well, what's key to this is knowing when to stop. I think it's time to stop. I'm going to put a fresh edge on my scraper and I'll be right back. Yeah, that's pretty good. Get my mask in place. Get my fan turned on. And get to it. Okay, I spent about the last 10 minutes with the 60 grit non-slashed sandpaper. I've changed now to 120 grit slashed, and that will allow the sandpaper to conform to the bark and the really odd areas that are on this piece, in here, around here, all over the place. So the next step is to clean up the dust around here a little bit and apply some sanding sealer. I will apply sanding sealer to the bark as well as all the finished areas. The whole thing will have sanding sealer. Of course, I've already done the underside. 2 coats of sanding sealer back there and then a coat of wax. And that's the same thing I'm going to do to the front. This just really brings out the color of the bark. Nice contrast with the light color of the wood. So I've applied 2 coats of sanding sealer and I'm just finishing up smoothing that out. Looking pretty good. It actually has a pretty nice sheen just after the sanding sealer. Has a nice sheen to it. I do like to add just a thin coat of wax. This feels very smooth. I said you can't attain a glass smooth finish, and that's true, but I'll tell you what, we're pretty close. Pretty close. And I'm really liking the contrast between the bark and the finished areas. Now I'm only going to apply wax to the finished areas, the bowl area here and each of these limbs. So we'll get to that. And it just takes a thin coat of this, so you don't have to apply much at all. Kind of rub it in. Alright. So I'm going to set that to spinning and turn my little heater on here. Just kind of a low temperature. Probably take about three to 5 minutes. So I'll be back when it's time to buff it up, and then we'll turn it around and clean up the bottom. Now, I'm sure you've heard don't bring cloth to the lathe, and I believe that. However, I think there's a right way and a wrong way, and I think if you're going to do it the right way, there's not a problem. I'm using a small pad here. I don't have it draping all over. I don't have it hanging out. It's not wrapped around my fingers. I'm just gripping it. If this turning were to grab it, it would simply take it out of my fingers. It's not going to wrap around my hand and yank it off. There's a lot to like in this piece, a lot to look at, a lot of different textures. Mother Nature at her best. I do feel real good about this piece. Is that up tight enough? I don't know if I can bring you any closer here. All right, let's turn it around and take that tenon off. Okay, I've turned it around. I've mounted my little block of wood in the chuck. I've got some non-slip material back here. I don't know if you can see that. I think so. I had my divot point that we made earlier. Brought up the tailstock. Got this to where it's pretty dang centered. I like to hold my thumb up here. That noise you hear is that little chip out in the tenon right there. It's hitting my thumb. Other than that, if I back off just a little and just catch the round part, it's very good. So we'll take the swept back gouge and just start working on this. Turn at about 370 RPM. Get just a little cleaner cut. Because this piece is out of balance and kind of heavy, that's about as far as I'm going to go before I start sanding right there. We'll get it thinner, but not until after I sand. So what I like to do, I use 2-inch sanding discs, and when I feel like I'm about done with them, I've used them up. That's when I set them aside, make a little stack of them. I write the grit on them. I stack them in order, starting with number 80 on the top, 100, 120, 150, 180, like that up through 400. So I keep those set aside, and that's what I use to do this sort of thing. They still work. So I'm going to turn the speed down just a little. It's about 250 there. And just come in there and sand that. Start with 80 grit. Doesn't take too much. So I'll just keep at this until I get through 400 grit, and we'll be back. Okay, it's all sanded up. This will match the rest of it once I get that wax applied on here, but it's very, very smooth. And now, I don't know if you've seen my tenon removal video, I go into a little bit more detail, but I basically do the same thing all the time. I like to use a 1/2 inch bowl gouge with the long taper on it so that I can get right in here and push up against this and just work this in here until I cut that right off. And when it's done, I've never had an issue. This one could be an issue because it is so heavy and so out of balance. But when I'm through the piece of wood, there'll be nothing holding the bowl up here except the bevel and the pressure I'm applying. So let's give it a go. I'll also have to work this down a little thinner as we go, but for right now, I'll just come in here. It does take a little bit of time, and I do want to be careful. So I'm applying pressure that direction. I have to take a little bit more of the center out of here to get my gouge in there. At some point the part touching the live center will stop turning, and that's when we know we're through. I'm going to switch to a smaller gouge. I'm getting nowhere fast with that one. It's a 3/8 inch bowl gouge, still swept back. See if that'll let me get in there a little closer. I still have to apply a lot of pressure that direction towards the headstock. There we go. You see how that stopped turning? That's because it's free. Just a little tiny amount there. Easily removed. I'll show you how I do that as well. So now it's just a matter of, I placed it on a non-slip mat on my workbench, and I just take my angle drill with a 2-inch, this happens to be 100 grit sandpaper, and sand off that center part. I'm going to keep at this for a minute. I don't want any evidence of how this piece was held when I'm done. Plus this gives me a nice area to sign my name and date it. So I'll be at this for a minute and I'll get back to you. A lot of times what we as turners like to do is apply a little decoration, a couple of grooves around the circle or whatever, and I've certainly done that my share of times, but with a piece like this, I like to leave it plain. I like to let the piece speak for itself. It's not really as much as what I've done to it, it's what I've not done to it. Does that make sense? So I'll let that dry a few minutes and apply paste wax. It's always so exciting to start a new piece, which I'll be doing soon. And it's always so exciting to finish that piece. Alright, there it is. It's always hard to figure out which way is the front and which way is the back. With this piece, there's so much going on. I'm not sure it matters. What do you think? Which way looks best? See, it just really doesn't matter, does it? If you like this video, thumbs up please. Oh yeah, if you want to subscribe, I'd appreciate that too. I'm just getting started. And I can use all the viewers I can get. And I'll just keep on watching the guys I watch, which is probably about 10 of them on a pretty regular basis. Alright, thanks for watching. Please subscribe. Have a great day. Take care. Here's Phil, signing off from Shady Acres Woodshop.